Maya sat frozen before her mother's study door, the paper trembling in her hand, a report card stamped with a red F. Her chest burned with shame, and a lie formed before she even thought it. "It got lost," she whispered, rehearsing the words. From inside, she could hear her mother's sharp voice on the phone lecturing someone about discipline and standards. Maya's throat closed. The lie slipped from her tongue like poison, quiet but complete. That night, as she hid the paper beneath her bed, her shadow flickered strangely on the wall, moving even after she stood still. For a second, it seemed to turn its head toward her, its mouth open in a silent question. What happens when a lie becomes the only truth you live in? Her heart raced. She switched off the light, but the shadow didn't vanish. It leaned closer, whispering something she couldn't yet hear. Outside, thunder cracked. Is this the night the truth begins to speak back? The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, gentle and gold, as if pretending nothing strange had happened. Maya moved like a ghost through the house, her smile mechanical. Lila was already at the kitchen counter, reading the newspaper, her eyes coldly sharp above the rim of her coffee cup. "You said your report card was delayed?" she asked, her tone casual yet loaded. Maya nodded quickly, forcing a laugh that sounded too high, too brittle. The lie felt heavier in daylight, pressing against her chest. As she turned away to pour juice, her shadow on the floor stretched longer than it should have, reaching toward her mother's feet. She froze, watching it crawl closer. Her mother didn't notice. When Maya blinked, the shadow slipped back into place like nothing had happened. She pressed her lips together. Maybe it was just her imagination. Or maybe the truth had begun to move on its own. At school, the lie followed Maya like a smell she couldn't wash off. Every sound, the bell, the laughter, the chatter of friends, felt distant. Her friend Clara waved from across the corridor, but Maya barely responded. She passed a row of mirrors lining the dance classroom and noticed her reflection blink a fraction too late. Her heart stuttered. For a moment, her reflection's lips parted, mouthing words she couldn't hear. When she leaned closer, the reflection whispered, "She already knows." Maya stumbled back, nearly colliding with a teacher. The reflection smiled faintly, while the real Maya trembled. Fear clawed at her throat. She rushed to class, refusing to look at any surface that could reflect her face again. But deep down, she knew. The lie was growing, feeding on every beat of her frightened heart. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. The ticking clock sounded louder than her heartbeat. Each time she turned, her shadow on the wall shifted after her, never at the same time. Finally, she sat up, clutching her blanket, whispering, "Stop!" But the shadow didn't. It tilted its head, then raised its hand and pointed toward the bed where the hidden report card lay. Maya's breath hitched. The air turned icy, her skin prickling. "You don't exist," she said, her voice trembling. But the shadow's head shook slowly, as if disagreeing. Then, in a voice barely more than a whisper, she heard it for the first time. "Lies never stay buried." Maya screamed softly, covering her mouth. Her shadow simply stood there, unmoving now, but its finger still pointed at the secret under the bed. Morning again. Maya sat at the table, silent. Her mother spoke about trust and responsibility, unaware that her daughter's mind was unraveling. Every flicker of light, every shadow on the walls seemed alive. When Lila stood and walked away, Maya saw it, their shadows overlapping on the floor. For a split second, her own shadow turned its face toward Lila's, whispering something she couldn't hear. Lila paused as if she sensed it. Her eyes narrowed. "Maya," she said slowly, "are you hiding something from me?" The question sliced the air open. Maya's throat tightened. Behind her, her shadow smiled again, a smile wide enough to be cruel. She managed to whisper, "No, Mom." The lie was complete, but this time, it wasn't hers alone. It belonged to both of them. Days passed. But Maya's world no longer felt real. She moved through it like an actress forgetting her lines, waiting for her shadow to reveal the next cue. Every night, whispers filled her room, soft but clear enough to understand now. Tell her. Show her. Stop lying. Maya stuffed her ears, but the voice was inside her, not outside. At school, she tried to act normal, but the shadow followed her even under fluorescent lights, moving against the rhythm of the sun. In the restroom mirror, it grinned while she cried. I'm you, it hissed, though its voice was deeper, colder. When she slammed her hands on the sink, the reflection didn't flinch. She looked down to breathe, but when she looked up again, her own mouth was still moving in the mirror. It whispered, "You can't hide what's already inside." That evening, Maya tried to study, desperate to drown out the whispers. Her desk lamp flickered, casting her room into alternating slices of light and dark. The shadow on the wall moved differently now, pacing slowly while she sat still. Her breath quickened. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight, but the light didn't make it vanish. Instead, the shadow stepped forward, separating slightly from her body. "Why do you keep lying?" it asked, its voice a quiet echo of her own. Maya gasped, stumbling back. "You're not real," she said, her voice breaking. The shadow tilted its head. "If I'm not real, then who's been talking all this time?" A silence heavier than thunder filled the room. Maya turned off the light, hoping darkness would make it disappear. But instead, darkness gave it strength. Lila began noticing things. The missing sleep, the pale face, the nervous silence. One night, she entered Maya's room without knocking. "We need to talk," she said, her voice firm but uncertain. Maya froze. The lamp buzzed weakly, and both their shadows spilled across the floor. Lila sat on the edge of the bed. "You've been hiding something. I can feel it." Maya's lips parted to deny it, but her shadow spoke first. "She lied to you," it said clearly, in Maya's voice but deeper. Lila's face went white. "What did you just say?" Maya turned toward the wall, horrified. The shadow's mouth moved without her. She screamed, "Stop!" but it laughed, repeating her hidden words. She failed. She lied. The room erupted in silence as Lila stood, trembling. The truth had finally found a voice of its own. After that night, everything changed. Lila avoided her daughter, terrified but pretending not to be. Maya could feel her mother's gaze follow her every step, searching for the girl she used to know. But there was no hiding now. Even during dinner, the shadow moved freely, standing instead of sitting, watching both of them. It no longer belonged to Maya. It was something separate, something aware. "You can't keep this up," it murmured one night as she brushed her teeth, its reflection moving closer in the mirror. "Lies rot everything they touch." Maya dropped her toothbrush and whispered, "Then what do I do?" The shadow smiled. "Tell her everything." Its tone was almost gentle now, but its eyes were endless pits. "Or I will." The next morning, Lila waited at the table, the failed report card lying open before her. Maya's heart nearly stopped. She'd searched for it the night before. It was gone from under the bed. "I found this," Lila said quietly. No anger, just disappointment deep enough to cut. Maya's lips trembled, searching for words, but before she could speak, her shadow rose tall behind her. Its voice filled the room. She never wanted to lie. "You made her afraid," Lila gasped, stepping back. Maya turned to it, pleading, "Stop." The shadow smiled, tender yet cruel. "Truth doesn't hide forever, Maya." For the first time, she realized it wasn't punishing her. It was freeing her, no matter the cost. Tears filled her eyes as her mother's face broke, the fragile trust between them collapsing like glass. Maya didn't leave her room for days. The air was heavy with unspoken words and old tears. Each night, Her shadow grew clearer, darker, almost solid. It began moving before she did, fixing her posture, tracing her hands, mimicking her gestures seconds too early, as if anticipating her thoughts. She whispered prayers into her pillow, but even those echoed back differently, warped by the thing on her wall. "You can't run from yourself," it said one night, stepping closer. Maya pressed against the wall, trembling. "I told the truth," she insisted. The shadow smiled faintly. Not all of it. The silence that followed felt endless, broken only by the sound of her heartbeat. Fast, terrified, human, the shadow lingered over her, its voice softer now, almost loving. "There's still more to confess, isn't there?" At school, whispers followed her like ghosts. Her classmates noticed her staring at walls, flinching at her own reflection. Clara approached her gently. "Are you okay?" she asked. Maya wanted to say yes, but her mouth opened and another voice answered, "She's not." The words echoed through the hallway. Clara's face drained of color. "Maya?" she whispered. Maya covered her mouth, horrified, realizing the shadow behind her locker had spoken through her lips. Students began staring. She fled down the corridor, clutching her bag. Hearing laughter turned to murmurs of fear. The world spun around her, too bright, too loud. "Stop following me!" she screamed, but the echo came again, from every wall, every reflective surface, her own voice, whispering, "You can't escape your truth." That night, Lila confronted her again, but this time her fear had turned to anger. "What are you doing to this family?" she shouted. Maya stood still, eyes hollow, her voice trembling. "It's not me, Mom." The lamp behind them flickered violently. On the wall, the shadow smiled, towering taller than both of them. "You raised her to be perfect," it said, "but perfection is another word for fear." Lila stumbled back, tears flooding her eyes. "Where are you?" she whispered. The shadow laughed softly, a sound that didn't belong to the world. "I'm the part of her you buried." Maya fell to her knees, covering her ears. "Please stop," she cried. But the truth didn't stop. It never does once it finds a voice. Sleep no longer brought peace. When Maya closed her eyes, she found herself standing in darkness, surrounded by countless versions of her own shadow whispering in unison. "You lied, and we were born." Their words echoed endlessly. She ran, but every direction led her back to herself. In one corner, a mirror floated, showing her mother crying, tearing up old report cards. Maya touched the glass. "I just wanted her to love me," she said. The shadows surrounded her, their forms dissolving into black smoke. "Then why did you hide?" they asked. The question tore through her. The smoke swirled, and the world dissolved. She woke screaming, drenched in sweat, the room still whispering her name. Maya woke at dawn, her eyes swollen from crying. Her mother was gone. Only a note on the table. "I can't understand what's happening. I need space." The words felt like knives. The house was silent, except for the faint hum of her own heartbeat. Then, from the wall, a familiar voice whispered, "She is gone because you never told her the truth." Maya turned slowly. Her shadow stood across the room, holding the shape of the note in its dark hand. "You did this," she said, trembling. The shadow stepped closer. "No, Maya." "You did." She reached out, but her fingers passed through it, scattering the shape into smoke. For the first time, she didn't scream. She just whispered, "Then what do I do now?" The shadow's answer came gently. "Start with the truth." Maya spent the day wandering through town, feeling weightless and hollow. She watched people talk, laugh, live, each moment reminding her what honesty looked like. By sunset, she returned home, but the silence waiting there was unbearable. Every wall seemed to hum with secrets. She stood before the mirror, trembling. "You'll tell her everything," she said aloud, hoping the shadow would hear. It appeared instantly, rising like smoke behind her reflection. "Everything?" it asked softly. "Even the things you've hidden from yourself." Maya hesitated. The memory hit her. Stealing money from her mother's purse months ago, blaming a classmate for cheating, smiling while others paid for her mistakes. Tears welled. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "Lies never care about meaning," the shadow replied. "They only care about surviving." That night, Maya sat with her phone, scrolling through old messages with her mother. Moments that once seemed normal, but now felt full of distance. "I love you," one said. Her shadow appeared behind her, whispering, "Did you mean it then?" She froze. "Of course I did." The voice grew colder. "You said it to keep her calm, not because you felt it." Maya shook her head violently. "Stop twisting everything," but deep down she knew the shadow was right. So much of her life had been built on pretending. Smiles, grades, kindness, even affection. "You don't love her," the shadow hissed. "You fear her." The phone slipped from Maya's hands as she buried her face in her knees. For the first time, she didn't argue. Silence was her only truth left. The next morning, Maya stood in front of her mother's closed bedroom door, clutching a letter she had written overnight. Her hands shook, but she was ready to tell everything, to beg forgiveness. The door creaked open slightly and she froze. Inside, the mirror on her mother's vanity shimmered darkly. The shadow was already there, waiting. "You think she'll forgive you?" it asked. Maya swallowed hard. "I have to try." The shadow smiled gently, but its voice was ice. "Forgiveness without truth is just another lie." The reflection in the vanity blinked once, then twice, and Lila's face appeared, though she wasn't in the room. "Mom?" Maya whispered. The reflection spoke. Her mother's voice warped. "You're too late." The letters slipped from her hands, fluttering to the floor like fallen guilt. Maya ran from the house into the rain, her clothes soaking instantly. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't breathe inside those walls anymore. The shadow followed, no longer attached to her. It ran beside her, keeping pace. "Running doesn't erase the past," it said. She screamed through the storm. "Then what do you want from me?" The shadow's voice was calm. "I want you to remember who you became to hide the truth." Lightning flashed, revealing their twin figures. One human, one darkness, moving in perfect synchrony. Maya stopped at the edge of the park pond, chest heaving. The shadow stopped too. "If you can face me," it said, "you can face her." For the first time, Maya met its gaze and didn't look away. Back home, soaked and shivering, Maya stood in front of her mother's chair, the one that always seemed like a throne. The house was silent, but she knew her mother would return soon. The shadow lingered behind her, softer now, almost protective. "You can't undo what's been done," it whispered, "but you can stop adding to it." Maya closed her eyes, whispering, "Then I'll tell her everything." The shadow nodded, its form flickering. "That's all I ever wanted." As dawn's first light broke through the window, Maya's shadow slowly began to merge back with her body, its edges fading into her skin. For the first time in weeks, she felt whole, but also terrified. Because when her mother returned, the truth would finally live outside her head. When Lila finally returned, her face was pale, eyes tired as if she'd aged years in a few days. The silence between them was fragile, dangerous. Maya stood before her, trembling, every breath a battle. "Mom," she whispered, "there's something I have to tell you." Lila's gaze hardened, but her voice was soft. "If this is another story, I don't want to hear it." Maya shook her head. tears forming. No lies this time. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly, each second stretching into eternity. Her shadow crept forward, barely visible in the soft afternoon light. "Start," it whispered. Maya's lips parted, and the truth poured out about the grades, the theft, the fear. Each word hurt, but each one made her lighter. Lila listened, face unreadable, until the last confession shattered the silence completely. For a long time, Lila said nothing. The ticking clock was the only sound. Then she whispered, "I wasn't angry because you failed, Maya. I was angry because I saw myself in you." Maya looked up, confused. Lila's eyes were glassy, distant. "I lied too," she said, voice trembling. "To your father, to you. I pretended everything was fine when it wasn't." The words cracked something open between them. Maya felt dizzy. Her perfect mother admitting flaws. The shadow behind her flickered uncertainly, shrinking slightly. "You lied too," it said quietly, almost curious. Lila looked at the shadow and nodded. "Yes, I did." For the first time, Maya and her mother stood united. Not in deception, but in shared imperfection. And the shadow, for the first time, didn't speak again. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. The house felt different, quieter, as though something had finally exhaled. She stood before her mirror, expecting the whisper, the movement, the mocking grin. But her reflection only looked back, tired, human, real. She smiled weakly. "Thank you," she murmured to the silent dark. The reflection smiled back at the same time, not a second late, not a heartbeat early. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, a soft applause for the courage it took to face herself. Yet deep within the silence, she heard one last faint echo. Not threatening, not cruel. "Remember me. Whenever you're tempted to hide again." Maya nodded. "I won't forget." And for the first time, the darkness behind her didn't feel like a threat. It felt like part of her. Days turned into weeks, and the house slowly filled with laughter again. Soft, cautious, but real. Lila and Maya cooked together, shared stories, even joked about the past. But some nights, when the lights dimmed, Maya would glance at the walls, half expecting her old companion. Once, while washing dishes, she caught a glimpse of her shadow smiling faintly, though her own lips didn't move. Instead of fear, she felt gratitude. Lies had built walls, but truth had torn them down, even if it came with scars. "You're free now," she whispered toward the faint silhouette. The shadow rippled briefly, then faded into perfect stillness, leaving only the steady rhythm of her mother's laughter in the next room. Weeks later, Maya stood at her bedroom window, watching dawn rise again. The world looked softer now. Not perfect, but honest. She whispered to the glass, "I'm not afraid anymore." Her reflection smiled back. Somewhere in the quiet light, she could almost hear her shadow's last words. "Truth doesn't make you pure. It makes you whole." The morning sun stretched across her floor, warm and forgiving. Maya turned, ready to face the day. The lie that once consumed her was gone, but its lesson remained, written in every shadow she'd ever feared. She picked up her school bag, took a deep breath, and stepped forward. Outside, her shadow followed quietly, not as an enemy, but as a reminder of who she'd become. Maya returned to school, her heart pounding as she stepped through the doors that once felt like a stage for her lies. The whispers had faded, replaced by quiet curiosity. Clara waited by her locker, hesitant but smiling. "You disappeared," she said softly. Maya nodded. "I had to fix something." They stood in silence until Clara handed her a notebook she'd left behind. "I kept it safe for you." Gratitude caught in Maya's throat. "Thank you," she whispered. As she opened it, a page fluttered out. A note she'd written months ago, pretending to be someone else to impress a teacher. Her chest tightened, but this time She didn't hide it. She laughed quietly and said, "Yeah, I did that." Clara blinked, then smiled wider. "Feels good to admit it, doesn't it?" For the first time, it truly did. After class, Maya found herself in front of the same mirror-lined dance room that once reflected her lies. She hesitated before stepping in. The empty room glowed faintly under the afternoon sun. She looked at her reflection and whispered, "You don't scare me anymore." Her voice echoed, calm and steady. The reflection smiled back in perfect sync. "Then you've learned," it seemed to say. Maya turned off the lights, expecting the shadow to return, but only darkness greeted her. Ordinary, quiet, real. For the first time, she realized darkness was never the enemy. It was her silence that had given it power. She stepped into the dim light again, smiling. "I'm not hiding anymore," she whispered, walking away as the room reflected only truth. That evening, Maya joined her mother on the porch, where the air smelled like rain and jasmine. They sat in silence, watching the sky dim into violet. "You've changed," Lila said quietly. Maya smiled. "I had help," she replied, glancing at the faint outline of her shadow stretching across the porch. "Do you still hear it?" her mother asked. Maya shook her head. "Not the way I used to. Now it listens." Lila looked at her daughter, so young yet so much older in her eyes, and placed a hand on hers. "The truth doesn't erase mistakes," she said. "It teaches us to live with them." Maya nodded, squeezing her mother's fingers. "Then I'll live better this time." Above them, the stars began to flicker. Small, honest lights against an endless dark. At the library, Maya volunteered to help younger students with their studies. She noticed a little girl crying over a torn test paper, trying to hide it under her arm, just like she once did. Kneeling beside her, Maya smiled gently. "It's okay," she said. "You don't have to hide it. Mistakes don't make you bad." The girl looked up, eyes wide with relief. As Maya guided her through the answers, she caught sight of their shadows on the floor, hers gently merging with the child's. It looked protective, nurturing, whole. She realized then that truth wasn't just about confessing. It was about guiding others away from the fear. For the first time, she saw her reflection in kindness instead of guilt. Later that night, Maya stood outside beneath the open sky. The air was cool, the world hushed. She stretched her hand out, and her shadow followed perfectly across the grass. "You're still here," she said softly. It didn't speak this time, didn't need to. The silence between them was peaceful, filled with mutual understanding. "Thank you," she whispered. A breeze stirred the leaves, and her shadow shimmered faintly, as if bowing. She smiled, eyes glistening with quiet pride. The girl who once lied to everyone, including herself, had finally learned the difference between truth and punishment, fear and freedom. Above her, the moon shone brighter, and for the first time, her shadow looked like a companion, not a curse. Weeks later, Maya stood in her school auditorium, giving a speech on honesty for an essay competition. Her voice was steady, calm, and unafraid. "A lie," she said, "isn't just words. It's a wall we build to hide from pain. But the pain doesn't disappear. It just grows in the dark." The audience listened quietly. Her eyes searched the crowd until she saw her mother at the back, smiling proudly through tears. Maya continued, "Telling the truth isn't easy. It burns, but it also frees." As she finished, the applause rose like thunder, filling the hall. For a brief second, she caught her reflection in the polished floor, her shadow clapping too, perfectly in sync. She smiled, knowing it no longer haunted her, it stood with her. After the speech, Maya wandered the empty hallway, feeling lighter than ever before. The world seemed sharper now, every sound and color vivid. Her shadow followed naturally beside her, no longer leading, no longer lagging. She stopped by a window, watching sunlight spill across the floor. "You stayed," she said softly. The shadow bowed slightly, as though acknowledging her strength. "Then stay As long as you need, she added. For a moment it flickered, then settled into perfect stillness. She touched her chest and felt peace instead of guilt. The sun warmed her face. Somewhere, deep within, she knew she'd never truly lose her shadow. It was no longer her enemy. It was her witness. That evening, Maya sat at her desk, writing a letter. Not of apology, but of gratitude. "Dear Mom," she wrote, "thank you for loving me, even when I lied. I understand now that truth isn't what we owe others. It's what we owe ourselves." She folded the letter and placed it under her mother's pillow, smiling faintly. As she turned off the lamp, her shadow stretched softly across the room, wrapping around her like quiet comfort. She whispered, "You can rest now." And in the hush that followed, the shadow shimmered faintly, like ink dissolving into water. When she opened her eyes again, the wall was empty. No darkness, no movement, just peace. Morning sunlight woke Maya. For a second she thought something was missing. Then she looked down and saw her shadow, faint but normal, lying gently beneath her feet. It didn't move ahead of her or whisper from behind. It simply was. She smiled, whispering, "Good morning." In that simple moment, she understood that the shadow had never been her punishment. It had been her conscience, her silent mirror. She stepped toward the window, light washing over her. Her mother called from the kitchen, "Breakfast ready." Maya laughed softly and replied, "Coming." For the first time, her voice didn't tremble. Truth, at last, had become her peace. That night, Maya and Lila sat outside under the stars. "Do you ever think about her?" Lila asked quietly. Maya tilted her head. "Who?" "The other you," her mother replied. Maya smiled gently. "I do," she said. "She wasn't evil. She was the part of me that wanted to be seen." They sat in silence, the night cool and endless. "She's gone now?" Lila asked. Maya shook her head, watching her shadow stretch along the porch. "No," she whispered. "She's just finally telling the truth." The stars shimmered above them, honest, eternal, unblinking. And as the wind stirred the trees, Maya's shadow leaned beside her once more. Not a haunting, but a harmony.